Child poverty in Auckland is not randomly distributed. It tracks deprivation and household structure. Children in sole-parent households, in large families, and in recent migrant families face materially higher rates of hardship, driven by lower wages, exclusion from some benefit entitlements, and high housing costs. Maori and Pacific children are overrepresented largely because their families are concentrated in the highest deprivation communities. Geography amplifies these patterns. High deprivation schools in Mangere, Aotearoa, Papakura and Henderson serve communities where many children are in poverty. The gap between core benefit rates and Auckland rental costs is the proximate cause of material hardship for benefit-dependent families. A sole parent with 2 children on the main benefit receives income that, after paying median Auckland rent, leaves very little for food, transport, clothing, utilities, and all other expenses for a family of 3. This arithmetic produces hardship regardless of budgeting skill or personal circumstances. A substantial share of Auckland children live in a household that cannot afford adequate food, clothing, and housing after paying rent. Material hardship is highest in South and West Auckland, where Maori and Pacific families are concentrated, and where housing cost increases have been most severe relative to incomes. Child poverty at this scale has documented long-run consequences for educational attainment, health, and adult earning. It is not a temporary hardship, but a structural disadvantage that shapes life outcomes. Auckland's income inequality is amplified by housing costs. Before housing costs, New Zealand's income inequality is moderate by OECD standards. After housing costs, Auckland's poverty rates are substantially higher because rental cost growth has outpaced income growth for the bottom 2 deciles. This means the poverty problem and the housing problem are the same problem viewed from different angles. Homeownership is the primary wealth accumulation vehicle in Auckland, and it is sharply stratified by income and housing cost burden. Markedly lower in the high deprivation communities of South and West Auckland, where Maori and Pacific households are concentrated in the rental market, than in higher income North Shore and central suburbs. Households shut out of ownership are systematically excluded from the equity appreciation that has been the main engine of Auckland wealth growth over 30 years. This is not a gap that closes with rising incomes alone. The deposit requirement for entry grows in proportion to house prices, creating a self-reinforcing exclusion. A persistent pay gap remains even after controlling for age and education, reflecting occupational concentration in lower-wage retail, hospitality and care sector roles, and ongoing credential and network barriers. The gap is not explained by educational attainment alone. Pacific graduates also experience a persistent pay discount, suggesting discrimination and network effects independent of human capital. Income inequality in New Zealand is moderate by OECD standards before housing costs, but Auckland's rental market transforms this picture substantially. When housing costs are deducted, the bottom 2 income deciles have experienced near-zero real income growth over 3 decades. The mechanism is straightforward. Rents have risen faster than wages for low-wage workers, and the share of income absorbed by rent has grown steadily for low-income renters since the mid-1990s. This is not a distribution story about who earns what. It is a story about who owns what and who bears the cost when the housing market inflates. Wealth inequality is structurally more extreme and more durable than income inequality. The wealthiest 10% of New Zealand households hold about 49% of net household wealth, and the wealthiest 20% roughly 2/3, with housing equity the primary wealth-building vehicle for the top half and largely inaccessible to the bottom half. This distribution is self-reinforcing. Home equity is the primary savings vehicle for middle and upper-income households, and households who entered the housing market earlier have accumulated equity inaccessible to renters of equivalent income. Intergenerational transfer now extends this divide. Parental equity provides deposit assistance that is structurally unavailable to those without family ownership.